Really excited for this session, digging into a topic that is kind of near and dear to me, building business cases and collaborating with finance. I think this is a love-hate relationship between revenue leaders and finance leaders, especially in 2023 when budgets are tighter and sellers need to hit quota. So excited to dive into it. We have an awesome group of expert panelists today, from some of the top companies out there. So as we get started, maybe we'll do quick intros and we'll ask everyone out there that's joining virtually to introduce themselves through the chat. Quick heads up, the chat will default at hosted panelists. So if you want to click on the little button there and change it to everyone, we can all kind of better collaborate and communicate here. But to start, we're going to do a little icebreaker. We're going to share where we're calling in from, and we're going to do an icebreaker question. We've tried a lot of these. I heard a great one actually on a call earlier today. We did as a kickoff onboarding session. It's going to be, what was your favorite cartoon growing up? So you're going to put in the chat where you're calling in from and your favorite cartoon as a kid. So I'm Ross, CEO and co-founder of Accord. I'm calling in from sunny yet cold Toronto, Canada. And man, I have a lot of favorites. My brother and I watched a disgusting amount of cartoons growing up on Saturday mornings. But one that comes to mind, we were actually talking, someone brought this up the other day. I don't know if you've heard of Reboot. It was like old school, like early 90s cartoon. It's a great one. Throwback. So I'm gonna have to shout out Reboot as one of my favorites from my childhood. And I'll pass it off to Brandon next for a quick introduction of yourself and where you're calling in from and your favorite cartoon growing up.
Yeah. Brandon Binder. I am calling in from the Bay Area, East Bay. I'm work at Webflow, leading our enterprise sales team. And I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I'm a kid of the 80s. So definitely the like G.I. Joe, He-Man, that type of era of toys and cartoons for sure. So yeah, it brings me way back to those days. Nothing was on demand. You had to actually watch it when it started. So
Totally. And I'll pass it off to Long next.
Hey everyone, my name is Long. I'm the CFO of Ada. We're building an AI agent that automatically resolves the most amount of customer support inquiry to different channels like voice, messaging, and email. And I'll go to 100% resolve everything without the need of a human agent in the loop, making sure everybody have the best experience and get their help immediately without any friction. So I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada, and this is a man, a character that it's not like when I was 5 years old, but I'm still watching him right now. His name is Monkey D. Luffy. He's a pirate in a manga called One Piece. And he's someone who really want to conquer the world and do a lot of amazing things with his friend and a super kind person. He's a pirate, but the kindest pirate out there. So yeah,
the kind pirate, love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to wrap up the group here, Evans, what about yourself? Where are you dialing in from? A bit about yourself.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it. Love being here. Thank you. I'm dialing in from my own headquarters here in Inglewood Cliffs, New Jersey, right outside New York City. Currently, after serving about 10 years with Salesforce, I'm over at Own now almost 4 years. So it's been an amazing ride. And Own, we're just a data platform, basically making sure our customers can own their SaaS data and really protect it, secure it, and do a lot of different things with it. And more importantly, monetize it. So super proud of what we're doing over here. Super proud of talking about today because it's a hot topic in regards to, selling, closing out a fiscal year here and getting those good business cases in front of those CFOs. For me, again, dating myself like Brandon, I did like He-Man. So I'll admit to that. I did like He-Man. I had some He-Man figures back in the day, Skeletor, right? But for me, I was a superheroes kid. The traditional stuff, Spider-Man, that superhero show with the Wonder Twin powers activate. I like that cartoon. So that was me.
Awesome. Well, a bit about the crew here and the generations that we are each from, but you're in the right place if you are excited to talk about this theory of building CFO-proof business cases. And we're not just going to be a bunch of revenue leaders here talking in an echo chamber. We're going to have Long tell us where we're right or where we're wrong and what he would hope to see as a decision maker and CFO at Ada. So really excited to dig in. I think before we, and also hopefully this is kind of not just us talking, but there's 50 folks that are just dialed in right now, a bunch more that are going to join. Would love to hear your questions. Like, what are the problems what are the deals you're working on right now? What are the things that as a leader you're trying to drive your team to do? Feel free to jump in the chat and kind of share that. So hopefully it's more of a bi-directional conversation here. But to start, I thought it would be good before we get into the details of, what sections and ROI and total cost of and ownership and all that kind of stuff. Like, why is this important? What is a business case to you? And how do you think about it impacting your business today? So maybe we'll go in reverse order. Evans, if you want to kind of kick things off and kind of share your take on what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I love to. I mean, listen, in my world, right, in the software world, to me, what a business case represents is a plan, a roadmap, that you're going to be able to navigate your sales cycle through a decision maker, a financial decision maker, people that you may not even have talked to during the sales cycle, but it's going to give them that roadmap to, is it a tech fit? Does it provide business value? Is it going to meet all those needs of the different audience of which you're going to put that plan together? I look at, trying to simplify it for this call. I thought about this call, and to me, it looks like there's like 3 buckets out there, right? You really got to talk about, what are the productivity gains, right? Those are more of the soft costs. You gotta check that bucket. You got to check a bucket on, can you decrease cost, right? Are you gonna decrease costs in any significant way? And are you going to de-risk anything within the business, right? Is there anything that the solution that you're going to sell is going to help the company avoid a risk or a loss? And a really good business case in today's environment, you need to check off all 3 boxes. Because if you don't, and what we're seeing every day is they can get turned down, because as they move up through the organization, right, through your decision maker or through your champion to eventually someone like Long on the call, you never know if those 3 buckets, which one's going to be most important to your audience and how it can get disqualified. And before you know it, your deal is pushed and you're scratching your head why.
Yeah, that's a really great point where I find certain people will care about certain things and there's no one right answer, right? Hey, for this industry, for this vertical, this stakeholder just cares about XYZ. Do a lot of discovery, and at the end of the day, you're not going to be in front of everyone to validate that. So you really need to kind of cover your bases and like you said, kind of not have as hope as the strategy. And going back Long, what's your perspective on this topic as we dive in?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I want to acknowledge with everyone on the call right now is that the selling environment we are in right now, and I talked with Evan about this at the beginning, is extremely difficult, right? So I feel extremely empathize with our sales team and every seller right now heading to the Q4. The entire macro environment is still very tough. Resource is not like very limited right now. So for any company to make a decision to allocate money and resources to a new initiative, it's a big decision in this environment. So for me, on top of making sure the business case actually being able to outline the ROI, the benefit, and so on, it's really important. It's an important tool for me as an executive in the company to actually understand how this initiative actually move up the key strategic objective of the company. I think a lot of the time people forget, hey, every company usually run with a handful of key objectives, either move revenue up, either strengthen the product, either be more competitive. So the key objective the company set for the whole year, and how will this tool or this new initiative actually tie back into the key initiative. And then we also look at this business case and compare this initiative with other initiatives. So for you, when you develop a business case, you actually, showcasing your thoughtfulness on how you actually help the company move the thing the most important for the company, and also fighting for your resource, because there are a lot of competing priority inside the company. So a thoughtful and very strong business case will allow you to actually fight for and advocate for more resource for your team. And that's my initial reaction on the question.
Totally appreciate it, Long. I think the thing that stood out for me there that we've talked a lot about at Accord, even internally this year, is you're not necessarily fighting for winning in your product space anymore. It's around the company's resources and initiatives. Right now, everyone's kind of really focusing their lens, whereas it was almost the opposite before. We were open to a bunch of different things and bets that we could be making. And that's almost your number one competitor. And like you're saying, really what the business case can help with is why not just, Ada or Webflow or Own, but why this problem over another problem? So that's a
Yeah.
really good, I think, lens to look at. And rounding us out, Brandon, yeah, what's your take at the high level before we get into the details here?
Yeah, I think it was said really well in the previous masterclass session you had by the CFO, which is that it's not about saving money necessarily. It's particularly in the times that we're in, there was a lot of stuff that was bought that wasn't needed. So why do we need this? And saving money helps, and everyone wants to save money, but I think one of the misconceptions is that a CFO just wants to not spend anything and be cheap and make everything as cheap as possible. And so they don't. CFOs want to spend money, they have budgets, they have targets they want to spend. They just want to spend it on the right things. And so I think that why is this, to your point, in the priority of all the things we can spend, important? And then the second part I would say is that another misconception is that we had a funny Slack where someone goes, hey, someone have like a business case, and then 50 different examples and 20 different formats flooded the Slack channel. And someone's like, well, they're all different. Which one do I use? And it highlighted the point that there is not one that like Webflow can send to customers and say, hey, this is your business case. Each one has to be tailored to that particular prospect, and the prospect has to understand it and own it and make it their own. And it's a one pager, it's a spreadsheet, it's a PowerPoint, it's a PDF, is going to be different for how that company internally digests all this information and has a discussion. And if any salesperson's expecting like their company will give them the business case template, there's certainly pillars, but every business case internally at a buyer is going to be different. Actually, Long, I'd love to hear, if that's true and how you guys have a particular way to digest that. But those things I've seen very, very consistently, that they have to be owned by the prospect, not by the seller.
Yep. Yeah. From my experience, as Brandon said, I think as a seller, you have the benefit of knowing and have seen a lot of the benefit that your particular buyer may not see at that point in time. They may only have a very acute problem that they want to solve for. So the benefit of the seller who have access to the entire customer base actually understand other benefit or add-on that your buyer right now didn't see it. So usually on our seller at Ada, we have more or less a template that we think work for most of our customer. And then I agree with Brandon, it's still the customer to actually complete the whole, ROIs and business case based on the actual data on their own. Cost per ticket is very different across different company. Every company have different volume, different channel that they support the customer in that case. So in the end of the day, as a champion, if you really want to advocate for something, you still need to own the entire process. The seller is someone who will be your partner and support you and guide you through the whole buying process. But as a champion, if you really want something, you need to work on it. So you cannot outsource it to the seller and expect they do the work for you and get the CEO to approve it.
Yeah, it's got to be highly collaborative is kind of what I'm hearing, right? Is you can't rely on this one template that's won a deal, but you also can't just rely on your champion to turn that into something to get it done.
Yeah. Ross, I see some questions from Connor Strap on here. Connor, thanks for putting questions out there. I think it pertains to what we're talking about is, listen, if you're lucky enough to sell a solution where you can have a calculator, and we've taken some stabs at some calculators here at Own, right? We've got a couple products where we can sort of calculate out costs, right, for a CFO like Long or something that do help the case. But the reality is, if that's all you're going on, like Brendan mentioned, that's not really the ultimate goal, right? You've got to spend the time doing the discovery with the customer, preferably early in the process, to really understand the business trends, what they're using your tool for, or what their pain points are, so that you can articulate that out. And I always like to say to people, tell a story, right? What's the story? What's going to happen to your business if your solution isn't in place or something? And then if you can articulate that throughout the process and it resonates with all the different audiences, and then I think you have as close to a foolproof business case as you can in today's environment. Although we were talking about before the call, I don't really know if there really is a full case business case right now with this macroeconomic environment, right? So, but I think that's really it is, you've got to get very specific, Brandon. It's great to have a calculator and use the calculator, but if that's all you're relying on, very rarely are you going to get that business case through. Someone is going to find some problem with it or some other thing. So it's got to be well-rounded, in my opinion, right? We talked about those 3 buckets at the top. If you're not checking off those 3 buckets and just relying on a calculation, someone's going to punch a hole in it and it's going to get defeated, is the way I look at it.
I'd say the ROI calculator, it's kind of, I think that Slack thread that I mentioned was a similar thing. Like, someone send me the calculator where I can just, ask some questions and punch in some numbers, and then like the number will spit out the bottom what the value of it is. And if it's more than my sales price, then I probably got a deal, right? And it's overly optimistic thinking that's going to be the way it works. And I think the second part of that question too is something that's worth noting and you mentioned this too, Evans, like soft costs. And so I've framed up, and I think we talk about educating the champion and how to think about it. And as a seller, I think we all need to know these things. I look at, there's buckets, like you said, and there's actually then buckets within those. And so every business is make money, save money, reduce risk. You look at, filings, you look at board reports, all of this stuff, 10Ks, it basically talks about those three things. But then there's subcategories of those. So under saving money, there's like cost takeout. That money goes away right now. Then there's also future cost avoidance. So as you scale, so if you double your company, you're going to need to double your engineers, right? Well, this solution would allow you to grow your engineers 10% versus 200%. And so as you break it into, I look at it in we kind of do 5 main buckets in our business cases. 3 of them are cost related. So it's cost takeout, cost avoidance, which is in the future. And then there's efficiency, which is the one that they say in the comment here gets discounted, because one of the biggest ways to get your business case is sort of conflating all these into the same category. Making a developer 20% more productive does not save you 20%. So if a developer makes 200 grand a year or whatever, saving a developer doesn't save you $40,000. You can't say that. And so when you you have to put these numbers into the proper categories so that, and Long, I'd love to hear you validate this. If someone came up with you and said, oh, I made everyone 20% more productive, so I now save 20% of their salaries, those numbers don't make sense at the end of the day because you don't actually get that money back. So I think you have to properly bucket, and you have to agree with your champion, like, hey, do you agree to these buckets? And I think every seller should come with an opinion. These are the buckets we typically see. These are the ones that CFOs typically will sign off on or approve. Do you look at it that way? And they have to say, yes, we look at it the same way. And great, let's classify each one of these values. I think, Evans, you had a couple of them as well, maybe said differently. But Long, I'd be curious, have you ever seen like a number comes across your desk and like, hey, this salesperson's telling me I'm going to save $2 million because, we're going to be 20% productive. You're like, that actually doesn't calculate. How do you think about those buckets as a CFO?
Everything needs to be rooted on realistic assumptions. I think if someone from Ada come to me, the first thing, like for me as a Steve test, do you have realistic assumption and do you actually understand your number? Meaning, do you understand the current business, condition of your department, your team, the current metrics, and then whether the assumption they propose to me in terms of, reduction or improvement on productivity, cost avoidance, and so on, is it realistic over a realistic time frame? A lot of the time, people come up with millions dollar number, but the time frame itself, hey, it could happen within the next 3 months, 6 months, immediately. It's immediately unrealistic assumption, and those business cases will likely be discounted very heavily. So finance people usually very data-driven people. So I think the advice for the team is like any business case, I think they need to start with making sure non-technical people can understand on this concept, right? Like make it very simple for people to understand. The model they're creating doesn't need to be super complicated, but they have to be rooted on realistic assumption. I bought into certain, saving up as long as the number is realistic, and we actually understand that it's doable over a realistic time frame. But if someone come up with a number or proposal that's not realistic, the assumption is challengeable, then I think they will be discounted heavily.
Yeah, that's the second part I didn't even get to, which is you have to be conservative. Ross, I was going to say, we both worked at Stripe, and people would come in and say, I'm going to do $100 million in payment volume on day one. And then we go, great, if we can get 1% increase in conversion, that's $1 million, right? And then they go, no, I never said we could do $100 million. You just, that's like our goal. But on the business case, we need to plan for the worst, that it's going to take 6 months longer to launch, and we might do $20 million in sales. And so you have to really, to your point, ground this whole thing really in like the worst case scenario, because that's where everyone's going to go right out of the gates. You'll get, like you said, Evan's getting holes punched in it. That's a huge hole that gets punched, is that the numbers were way too optimistic, or the timelines are too fast, or whatever.
Yeah, what Brandon just shared is a very common concept in finance when we project anything or when we model anything, we call sensitivity analysis. So basically, as a CFO, when I look at the business guy, I actually want to see people think through, hey, this is a conservative scenario, this is the realistic one, and this is like the upside scenario. And a trick for you when you actually provide sensitivity analysis, immediately the thing like the trade-off in people's mind will be, right, I can live with the most conservative outcome, and we also have the upside on the best case scenario. And that is usually give people more juice and optimism to actually view your business case, a little bit more optimistic. And it's also showcase that you actually thoughtfully think through different outcome, both from a conservative one and the upside one. But if someone only come in and provide the most optimistic outcome, then it's not something that usually will fly with a CFO.
Very true.
Totally. Yeah, Evans, I'd be curious to get your take on kind of something specific on that. And I think a lot of people do provide this, incredible like upside thing without the, kind of realistic stuff. And one thing that I see when I work with champions is one of my biggest red flags is when they only provide the amazing, extraordinary numbers. They're like, oh, this person just totally gets what my solution does. They're the best champion ever. They're going to go to the CFO, they're going to make this case. I'm like, they are going to go to this person and they're going to get laughed out of the room. Or someone's going to smile and nod at them, and we're never going to get this approved. I almost want my champion to be putting their CFO hat on or finance hat on and saying, how are we going to build something for them? Instead of just being excited that you're the person that totally understands your solution is going to get, right? Be curious to hear how you kind of navigate that situation where you might have this champion who you're kind of getting the feeling that might not have the kind of social credibility to go to finance because they're not going to bring something that seems realistic.
Well, I mean, it happens a lot, right? And I think as you mature as a rep, as you have good coaching from your leadership, you do have to challenge your champion. And if that person's really a champion, it's almost like you're drilling them as a lawyer, right? Cross-examining them, right? On the questions to say, is this going to fly? I think, I looked at some real life examples of stuff that have just happened to us. I think sometimes when you just go in with productivity gains, one of the things that we found was the champion. Well, sometimes you got to ask your champion, well, what are you going to have to sign up for additionally to get this? And are you prepared to do it? Right. So when you get in front of your CFO or your CIO and your CIO goes, that's great. You're going to get all these productivity gains. We'll buy into it. Are you ready as a sales leader to sign up for $5 million more of quota because of this? Or if it's another solution and it's not on the sales side, are you ready to decrease your headcount next year by 4 to pay for this? And then all of a sudden, if you've just grounded yourself in productivity gains, your champion is going to shrink away very quickly and say, I don't want those things. I'm not signing up for them. Then he's going to come back and tell you, sorry, budget got slashed, because he doesn't want to admit his utter failure. And you're sitting there scratching your head going, God, I thought this deal was done. He was so excited. So we've literally seen that in the last couple of weeks. And so as I started off, like, you've got to, if to really have a good solid, productivity gains is great and you get everybody excited about them. But if you're not grounded in any other things, right? I don't know if anyone's heard of like prospect theory. That's always fascinated me. I learned about it a couple of years ago where, as a human being, when you make decisions, right, it's about avoiding a loss versus potential gain.
Oh, avoidance. Yes.
So, but if you really think through that and how you position your value plan, you want to make sure that you're actually anchoring it in a lot of loss, and risk, because people are prone, just normal human beings will make a decision to avoid sort of that loss than potential get a gain. And listen, there's a lot of studies out there. If anyone wants to go read about them, they're pretty fascinating. But if you do it on your own, you do it in your personal life, it does work. So, I mean, a tip and trick that I've been telling my teams is, make sure, you're explaining in your value deck right now, what are you going to lose, right? If you don't do this, what is the risk to your business? Not grounded in a bunch of productivity gains, which are great, but company's going to be like, great, we're going to punt on that till next year. We want to get those gains someday, but right now I'm going to do the other proposal that's avoiding all this risk for me right now, or this potential loss. So I don't know, just a tip and a trick for everybody out there that I've seen and just try it. I think it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's worth coming back to the point. It's a couple in the chat of like being very clear. And again, I call them buckets or categories, whatever, that in the savings bucket, there's three flavors. There's the cost takeout, there's avoidance, and the efficiency. And the efficiency one is the one we keep talking about. And I say this is soft. And you have to basically assume that a procurement person or a finance person will just be like zero, all of that, no value. Like, I get it. I understand what you're saying. The bottom line doesn't change because someone can work 20. That person can take a longer lunch. That person can take Fridays off now. That doesn't actually help me save money. So you have to call that out as a separate category. And this is like the efficiency can be like gravy on top and it can sweeten it. But then you really have to focus on, okay, is there anything in the cost takeout? And if you're replacing a big multi-million-dollar platform or something, that's easy. But it gets harder. We have a great example. We sell against like a WordPress, which is free. And I always tell the team it's free like a free puppy, right? You still need to feed it and walk it and take it to the vet, and it'll get sick on occasion, and it'll get old and eventually it's free. So there is no cost takeout in, say, in our world, like a WordPress. And so everyone goes, there's nothing in the cost takeout bucket. So you have to look in the other buckets. Other times we replace big expensive solutions and it's $1 million of cost takeout. So I just think being really specific when you say a number, which one you're talking about, and being fully aware that efficiency, I call it squishy, it's soft, it's, Matthew McConaughey, it's a Fugazi, it's a Fugazi. You got like, and you have to be fully prepared that that's going to be, and then the risk is kind of similar. The only one that's really concrete is super easy to understand is cost takeout, and everything else has nuance to it that you have to be prepared to address. Well, what do you mean 20%? How did you calculate that? What's that based on? And that comes back to the conservative piece. So if there's like one thing that you take away from my opinion is if you have a number at the bottom, the whole thing gets thrown out because they're like, well, how did you add that up? It's the buckets, it's the categories, and the teams will weigh those as they see them important, but they cannot. It's apples and oranges. You can't try to lump them all into one final number.
One comment I want to make on the efficiency thing, and this is my personal opinion. During the last growth cycle, all of us are so spoiled with so many tools and so many nice to have tools. Everybody, can justify buying anything just in service of growth. That environment is no longer the case. The perception among the CFO community right now is our people are very spoiled. People just need to actually go back to basics and just focus on what's most important for the company. So adding another new tool, not necessarily will actually help them be more productive. The fact that can help them more productive is actually focus on what's most important at different point in time, instead of like trying to do more with more tools. That is like actually the conclusion. So if someone come and say, hey, this tool will make the team faster, save 2 hours here and there, I say, guy, instead of buying a tool, focusing on maybe eliminating the scope of the stuff you're working on, and just tie back into what's most important objective for the company. Because the fact that you guys need to improve and get more hours to work, meaning either you're doing too much or the scope is actually too much, and you need to reduce the scope before even spending more money. Because at some point, if you continue to operate the same way, you constantly be actually at some point you need to buy something else because you have too many things on your plate. So you need to actually fix the root cause of the problem, which is you have the right scope and you focus on the right thing. Then that usually how I think about if someone come in, hey, productivity tool, yeah, you can still do your work today. Just adjust your scope first before you even like pay more money to just like have some incremental increase on productivity. Yeah. And keep in mind, when you sell in this environment, I think most of the company objective is how can they actually strengthen their runway, focus on profitability, improve the margin. So if you not be able to directly or indirectly contribute to that objective, it can be a hard sell in this environment.
Yeah, and maybe just to switch gears for the last 10 or so minutes here, I think when a lot of people hear the word business case, they think ROI calculator, they think purely numbers. And I think you're hitting on maybe an important thing for us to talk about at the end here that it's probably a lot less talk is what Evans already called the narrative. And it's the positioning. And I think that this is something that we really need to kind of like get out of those bad habits around everything being optimization, productivity, efficiency, to plugging into what is the existing mindset of a CFO. It's going to be very different probably than your champion. of the organization that you're working on that's going to deeply understand exactly how this helps. Even if your tool is exactly what they need and is going to have all this impact that you're talking about and reduce, whatever, it's not the mindset, like you're saying, of the CFO. And if you know that that is a person that needs to say yes to it, you're going to have a totally different narrative and business case for that stakeholder and help your champion understand that that's how internally they need to be talking about it. And this is something that I think the best sellers and leaders do, but like 90% of teams don't make that adjustment when they think about it going to the CEO or the board or whatever that level is. You got to kind of scratch everything that kind of got you into that meeting in the first place with the team that you're working on, right? Say for us, we sell to sales teams. Everything that I'm saying to that CRO, VP of sales, et cetera, should probably be very different than what I'm talking about the CFO, because they have no idea of what we do and how we do it and how it's going to impact all this stuff. What do they care about? The things that Long just said. How does this extend our runway? How does this cut costs and how does this narrow our focus? So now I need to totally reframe the entire pitch to this specific person. So I'd be really excited to hear kind of from Brandon and Evans, seeing a lot of nods, like how do you help your team reframe and kind of build the narrative around that kind of senior most decision maker in finance?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different sales training companies that go out there and teach different frameworks, but they're all sort of in the same format where there's the opening part, which is like current state, challenges. Some call them negative consequences is one, it's out there pretty commonly. Future state, or there's as is and to be, and then positive business outcomes or impact. It's all kind of the same idea. And I think we gloss by that so much. And to your point about tailoring it to the audience, I was at Zora a long time ago, and this is where I learned this, where there's the billing person in the back room cranking out the invoices, and they're like, oh, it takes me so long, and there's this button that I have to do manually. And then if you bring that to like your challenge, there's a manual button, and the problem is it takes 6 hours to create an invoice. And then you bring that to the executives, they're like, all right, I'll outsource it to done, right? Or I'll just hire an intern. And that point about tailoring it to the right level. So I think that current state for one person might be like, it's hard to do billing, where the executive is going to be like, you have plans that you announced publicly with your board, or you just took funding based on expanding to Europe and being able to sell your product in 15 new countries. So that problem is significantly different than the person doing the invoice. So you're going to work every day with your champion or your coach or whoever's using the product. And if that narrative up front, the current state, challenges, future state, positive business outcomes, et cetera, is at the wrong level, you won't even get past the second bullet. That bullet needs to be like, I know your business goal is to grow revenue by 30% by expanding to Europe next year and moving into Asia, and the billing solution helps with that or whatever, is a totally different narrative. And I think AEs skip over it and they try to get to the number and they try to get to the demo. But that first headline sentence is going to be the thing that I think that executive checks in and goes, yes, I am trying to solve that problem. Or everything else you just said is relevant because the premise up front was off. So I think tailoring it to the right level and probably changing it as you get to that level is going to be critical.
Totally.
Brandon just nailed what I mean, absolutely changing it according to the audience you're going to be addressing is what he said. And funny, you just went through a process. We have a very, very similar template here, business value case, current solution, pains, what are the challenges? I mean, very similar. We put a great deck together. I've seen some really strong ones here at Own, but the problem is if the business challenges and the pains that you're addressing in your business case, you've got to know the buying decision, right? And how it flows in. And so you've got to do some discovery on that. And one of the interesting things that we've seen over the course of the last 12 months is sometimes the champions don't even understand the decision-making process, because the decision-making processes are changing so rapidly at companies. So you've got to be super paranoid. You've got to drill in. You've got to ask a million times after you. And this business case suits you, Mr. Champion or Mr. Customer. Let's talk about who you're going to present this to, and do these same pain points resonate? And you got to dig in, and you can't get lazy in this stage, right? So you've got to change your business case and tweak it to the audience and know who that audience is going to be. And unfortunately, many times you're not going to be the one presenting the business case. So you better do a lot of good coaching from whomever's going to be presenting that business case and make sure that they represent it the right way. That's the other big challenge too.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. You are not in the room when this happens. Even if you have an audience, you get lucky enough to get to the CFO, whoever the economic buyer is, you have an hour if you're lucky in a lot of sales, if you can get an hour with the signer or the economic buyer, there will be 12 hours. There's the hallway afterwards, there's the debrief, there's the finance meeting, there's the budget meeting. When the contract hits their desk to sign it, what am I signing again? Every single one of those moments, you are not there. And you have to assume that there's going to be someone who has access and influence, the economic buyer, that can explain that. What's that number again? You're not there 90% of the time. I think we give ourselves too much credit as salespeople that this 20-minute pitch is going to nail it. It's going to change the opinion of everything. No, you're going to hang up. They're going to forget half of what you said. They were multitasking during the Zoom. And a lot of it's going to happen in the conversation when you're not in the room. I mean, Long, you've probably gotten a couple contracts across your desk and you have to ask someone, wait, what are you asking me to sign? Can you give me the 30 seconds on this? And you're not asking the sales rep that. You're asking the person who sent it to you, asked you to sign it, right?
Yeah, this happens a lot of the time, but we try to get to a stage where we don't get into the contracting stage until we actually got FP&A to approve that, hey, we have the budget, we have the actual needs, so at least we weed out a lot of the nice to have stuff. So yeah, there are a couple tips for the audience. I know someone who already posts on the channel, but I think you should leverage, like the champions should in the company, if they want to buy anything, they need to leverage the FP&A team and all the finance partner. So this can be the group that actually help you strengthen your case, help you without any assumption, or help you strengthen your assumption and make it more realistic and actually buy into what you're trying to achieve before that is being submitted to the executive team to review. So FP&A will be your best friend in terms of helping you to successfully submit and refining a business case. So that I think that's tip number one. The second thing I want to reiterate is it's very important as a seller to actually ask a question about as a business as a whole, not you, Mr. Champions, what you're trying to achieve with your department, what your company want to achieve as a whole next year, what the 3 key most important objectives. Ask them. Because it's very important for the executive, because when your business can actually tie back into this key objective, it will actually check the box. Because the department may solve a problem that actually may not directly or strongly move the 3 key objectives, and they will fail to actually get funding. So it's really important you come and ask those questions first, or find a way to actually understand. If you're selling to a public company, you go and read earning report and actually understand what they try to achieve. It's a private company, try to make friends with the champions and get them to actually share that with you during discovery call, because it's very important you tie back the business case to the key objective of the company that the company want to move. And that will really help you to strengthen and future-proof your business case when it's go down the road to exec team to review it.
Hey, Ross, if you don't mind, I want to ask Long a question. There's a word I just realized we're 39 minutes in that has not come up. Procurement. We've not talked about procurement. Long, what is I'm assuming in most companies, procurement, like most companies, procurement rolls up into finance, is under your organization. What's your expectation of a procurement person in the process? Do you they want you to beat up the vendor on price and you want to see them show a 10% discount or $100,000 in savings? Do you expect what's your expectation with procurement and when you have them go sick them on the salespeople?
Generating saving is great, but like we have a very, very good procurement manager, and our North Star is not only just so the way we think about procurement is actually a very strategic function to actually educate the team on how to buy and make decision on buying anything. Because a lot of the time in the past, I'm seeing department or our champion like a tool and just go and buy one without even considering other options. So the role of a procurement person is actually go and partner with them and evaluate other alternatives in the market. I think that is a very important part that people actually didn't recognize. If you're really in love with the tool because you work with that tool in the previous company, like the whole tech ecosystem changed so quickly. There may be a new vendor that actually provides a similar capability, cheaper or even better. So it's really important we actually go and navigate the market, understand alternative out there, and then get all these proposal in one place. And now it's actually part of that. It showcase that you actually considering alternative as part of your proposal and clearly understand what you are signing up for. Why you buying this vendor over other vendor? So that's the role of the procurement team to actually help the champion navigate the buying cycle and help them make better decisions, not just like beating up the sales team. I think that's table stake. That's their job to making sure we get the best deal. But like the value add for procurement is to supporting the champion to make better decisions and evaluate different alternatives that are viable for us in the market.
Okay, great question, Brandon. I'm glad you brought that up. And Long, it's interesting to hear your perspective on like how you want your team educated on how to buy. And I think that goes back to like the job of a great seller, especially at market and upper mid or enterprise, is you want to be proactively bringing those things up so they don't happen later. Like you want to be like, have you looked at alternatives? Which ones we're going to put this in the business case that's going to go to finance because we know what questions are going to be asked internally. Like how can you kind of reflect it back to what that conversation is going to be like? And I think it's, in conversations like this and what the best sellers and sales leaders do is, hey, I'm going to share with you what the last 20 years has been like to work with these people and the things that have, led to those internal conversations that have led to, roadblocks or time killing all deals from these conversations. And I think you want to be as my understanding is you want to be as proactive as possible. You want to come with the first answer to that question without them even have to ask it, because if they do ask it, you're already done. Like, then you're like, have they looked at it? Even if they have, and you don't prove it right away, they could have some FUD around, well, they didn't do enough market research because it wasn't included in the business case in the first place. So I think that's a really, really good point.
So one more comment I want to make. Earlier in my career, when I had to buy a lot of stuff for Ada, my approach was very different from how we approach like working with seller right now. In the early days, it's kind of like more of a power move where we come in, we try to grill down the price and like, only tactic to hold on sale. I just feel like it's exhausting for both sides. What I actually realized, and I've learned a lot throughout the first year or two of doing so, is that we need to build a relationship, right? Because if we really select someone as a partner, we want them to also work with us and evolve with our business down the road. So it's like I evolve my process, like the way I interact with the sales team, like right now. For me, I came in, I very transparent, tell them, this is what we want to achieve. This is a limitation on our end and why. It's really important to tell the AE, hey, we want to, this is a limitation and why. Because a lot of the time procurement just go and throw in, this is a price. Or like, we only want this, without explaining to them the why. Because the AE also need to be able to take the why the business need to solve, come back and make a case to that, like, sales leader, so for them to empathize with what the business try to achieve. So they actually approve the pricing that actually work for both sides. And the key unlock for me is we need to treat AE and the seller as partner. Because at some point our business is growing, we need to come back to them and continue to buy more from them. So if we have set up the whole relationship on like a bullying or power, a power move where we bully the other side, I just feel like never get a better deal down the road. They will try to find way to recoup when we actually install the software. Now they're in a power move because we cannot get rid of the software. So it's really important to be transparent with each other, empathize with each other, and help each other, and be very transparent on what we can do, what we cannot do. But like I always, when I meet an A, I say, look, I know you have many other deals you need to close, and I really want to solve this problem inside this one deal. So you can move on with other stuff for your end of quarter, and I can move on with other stuff. And then I tell them about all the stuff that I just mentioned, and I found personally that approach worked really well to have the AE advance a deal and also to help us buy whatever we want at the price we need, assuming it's a good deal for both sides. Just like want to throw it out there.
No, and it's helpful. I mean, that's why I think a lot of people register for the session is to hear straight from you, Long, of like, how do you think about this stuff? Because that's the challenge.
Keep in mind, not everyone will like approach this like buying the same. You will have traditional procurement team will do traditional approach of beating up price and so on. So just get prepared for it. And keep in mind, here another thing that I'm seeing, like it's important for seller to understand the procurement team also being evaluated based on saving or quantified saving and so on. So, whatever you can give them doesn't mean you have to discount pricing. Important like payment term, right? Like annual to quarter is something very important for company right now. Instead of discounting things, you can come and give them other benefits that important for the business to manage cash flow. And potentially you may be able to not have to discount the price, but still get a deal done.
Yeah, it's a really good point. There's other levers. Well, I know we're just wrapping up here. Really appreciate Evans, Brandon, Long, you all taking some time out of your day to, kind of prep and join us live here. Appreciate all the questions from the 50 plus folks that joined. And yeah, if folks want to get in touch with people on the call, feel free to look them up on LinkedIn. And yeah, happy selling and closing out Q4, whether you're end of December or January. And yeah, hopefully building some better partnerships between finance, procurement, and sellers out there.
Ross, I'll just comment on that poll. Most people don't have a standardized business case, but most of the time they're providing ROI. Like the first question and the second question are actually interesting. 59% don't have a standardized business case, but 50%, or always actually 73% of the time they're providing ROI, but 59% of companies don't have a standard template, the sales team. So pretty interesting.
That's why interesting.
That's why we had this session, right?
Well, the whole point is I think people are throwing out numbers that aren't positioned well, that aren't built for finance. They're built for the champion. You're talking all the things we talked about, right? You're throwing out this number, you're hoping it's get done. And that's why I don't think we're building great partnerships with finance, because we're not thinking about them as the real decision maker. So
that's that survey was illuminating.
Yeah. Hey, great seeing everyone. Good luck selling in Q4. And yeah, it's my pleasure to meet all of you. And yeah, it's so fun.
Good luck, everyone. Close out well. Happy holidays.
Let's
Thanks,
go.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone. All right. Bye.